Lovely. Thank you very much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm Daniela Bultoc, and my background is in higher education, where I worked for about 14 years. I've started working in higher education as a researcher developer, supporting the professional and personal development of our researchers and academics. And I do have a heart for our research and academic community. I then moved on to being an organizational development consultant and a communities of practice expert, which is where I'm coming today to share some of the insights around the piece of research that was conducted at the national level this year during the summer. So I'm bringing some of the experience that I've had, first of all, at UCL, where I was employed as a head of communities of practice. And then together with a group that was set up last year, the Communities of Practice in Higher Education group, we've conducted this research, and we're funded by Organizational Development in Higher Education Network, so ODHE. So without further ado, this was the collaborating team. This is actually part of the core group of our network. And together with Sarah Hubbard from University of Glasgow, we initiated this group somewhere in May 2020, when it was about the time when I actually finished my project at UCL and I jumped into my own business. And it was during the first pandemic, and Sarah came to me and approached me and said, Daniela, what is it that we can do to better support perhaps the higher education sector by learning from some of the lessons that you've taken from communities of practice? At UCL, the communities of practice that we had set up and that I enabled to set up through the Organizational Change Project had won a national award for Best Organizational Change Project. So they've really perhaps brought the evidence within the sector of how efficient they can be in changing that siloed way of working in our higher education institutions towards more collaborative approaches, innovative and meaningful, as we'll see from this research as well. So in terms of the aims of the research, first of all, we wanted to develop and share practice around the benefits of communities of practice in higher education. And second, because this was the context in which we've worked in the last 18 months, and now we're looking at a new way of working, we wanted to understand what is it that we can learn from our communities of practice around hybrid ways of working. And we know communities of practice have operated in person, they've operated online, and also using hybrid approaches. So we really wanted to explore what is it that we can learn, thinking about where the sector is moving, going ahead. Obviously, we already know what communities of practice are in terms of really bringing people together who share similar concerns, passions, needs, challenges, but also those people who share similar values, as we've heard in the talk before, or similar skills, expertise, shared purposes, or shared visions of what success and excellence might look like. Communities of practice allow different types of contributions. So from core groups to active membership, people who actually work on certain projects, to wider membership or occasional membership, and stakeholders engagement, where people indirectly will perhaps impact and contribute to a community of practice. These are very interesting and important elements when we start then to broaden up and see what it is that we can learn from our communities of practice. So in terms of our research methodology, in our group, we have three academics, and especially in the collaborating team. So we had a research strong methodology. So we looked at carrying out, first of all, primary research. So we did a survey which was launched at a national level. This was quantitative and qualitative data that was collated. We also followed up with a focus group. And then we really wanted to consolidate all of the findings into emerging themes that would inform some of the steps forward. In terms of our response rate, so this was launched in July and it was open for about a month until August. So we had about 59 survey respondents. And in terms of the types of UK HEIs, we had about 57 Russell Group universities and about 43 from other HEI. It was really nice to see a combination of academic communities responding to this. About 18% of the people who responded were identified as academics and 82 as professional services. In terms of the focus group, we had 7 focus group participants. again, with a mixture from Russell Group universities and other London-based and Scottish HEIs. What is important to notice is how communities of practice, even just from the respondent rates, they show the fact that there is a way through perhaps bridging that gap between the academic and professional services community. And this is one of the experiences that I've had in some of the research that we've done through this piece of research, but also my experience of working at UCL, and I've also done some work at the European level. And we see how communities of practice really open the door for different participation. So in terms of the literature key findings, first of all, the sector we know has encountered major challenges in the past decade and around maximizing internal resources and focusing on improving effectiveness and efficiencies. And this has been a priority for most of the universities. And there was perhaps a desire and the need for looking at transformational change or looking at how can universities differentiate from one another. And especially when we're looking at and thinking about the marketization period that most universities are going through. And especially now more than ever, considering how to mobilize effective and hybrid ways of working, notably in shared and distributed leadership models, it's really impactful, especially in the virtual context. So there is significant overlap we've noticed between high-performing teams and the ways that communities of practice operate, particularly around shared purpose and goal, and also that psychological safety which communities of practice enable and allow for, and they allow for that open participation. Also, we've noticed that when we then consider communities of practice, a growing number of research and organizations show how communities of practice are now seen as the social capital of organizations because they allow that internal knowledge to be maximized. They allow for internal mobilization of knowledge, alignment, and innovation and collaboration. So in terms of the headlines and the survey findings, 2 in 3 respondents were members of a community of practice. And what is more interesting, though, to identify was that actually 43% of the communities of practice were established during the pandemic, with about 80% of them reporting they were established in the last 5 years. This means that somehow this period in which we were working remotely has encouraged quite a lot of people to think about how can we actually come together in more meaningful ways. In terms of the experience around COVID-19, 3 in 5 respondents identified increased membership, participation, and accessibility participating virtually. And about 3 in 5 respondents identified the importance of leadership, and especially values-based leadership, including diversity, flexibility, and inclusion when speaking about communities of practice. Practice areas, 1 in 3 were self-formed. 1 in 4 communities of practice have reported they were set up by external support, like an external consultant or specialist. 1 in 5 mentioned they were supported by and set up by a leadership team. But we also have a few small percentages where communities of practice have emerged from PhD projects or research projects or proposals made to a research community, because this is where the need was identified. So in terms of the survey headline, the value that communities of practice bring is obviously around connection, sharing, collaboration, sharing knowledge, experiences, ideas, but also is that ability to innovate with like-minded people. And I think the one that really stands out for me is that knowledge exchange in a safe space where everyone feels a sense of belonging. Everyone feels that there's a common purpose that is underpinned by common values and practices. There are a few critical elements of success when it comes to communities of practice. Once they're set up, it's very important that there is some visibility, that they are seen within the organization, and there's some sort of strategic sponsorship and championing. And there's an alignment not only to the internal purpose of the community of practice, but also that something that goes beyond perhaps that department, that organization, and there's an alignment with a bigger purpose. So there's something around clarifying roles, priorities, and ensuring there's a regular communication. In terms of the response to hybrid, this was very important. So hybrid, we defined it as working flexibly from different locations, depending on the need. And 45% of the respondents identified that a hybrid working policy was in development at their institution. However, 2 in 5 respondents identified their institutions to take a flexible approach, but still there was a split between the need for off and on campus. In terms of the terminology, we noticed that there are different ways that this is actually phrased. Some people call it hybrid, others call it flexible, or a blended mix and combination of the terms. So some of the thematic analysis that emerged from this is that there are shared characteristics between communities of practice and high-performing teams. And especially when it comes to getting or tapping into that intrinsic motivation around changing things or being united around things that are meaningful. Communities of practice disrupt the them and us because they are very fluid, and they disrupt the hierarchical and power dynamics in organizations. They also enable that living titles at the door approach, and they encourage distributed and situational leadership, which means that everyone feels that they have a voice when that is needed. In terms of the learning around communities of practice, we know that communities of practice they go beyond just a training session. They actually promote engagement. They promote that values-based approach. And we know that they promote that safe space where everyone feels a sense of belonging. I'd like to share perhaps the last learning around the fact that communities of practice do encourage participation, and especially in the hybrid ways of working, we know that accessibility has increased. Also remember that in terms of engagement, communities of practice engage members sometimes who are not that visible, and they proactively empower members to take space in the groups. And leadership is about really celebrating people who actually put themselves forward, and also celebrating the success of communities of practice. If I was to summarize how we put the heart back into higher education, well, communities of practice enable a human-centered approach where titles are left at the door, diversity is appreciated, and people can come together and be accepted and feel included. It's about following the energy, passion, and need around a certain area. Communities of practice also enable that space for meaningful work because people gather around things that are meaningful, and also they enable members to be listened, to share and challenge one another in a very supportive space. And last but not least, communities of practice are powerful in our sector because they reconnect us to the essence of academia. It's about generating and sharing knowledge, collaborating and participating in a learning process, and really reconnecting in such a way where we feel that people are appreciated. So perhaps a challenge and food for thought. I wonder, how does this research enable you to take action on, and what key messages do you think that we can take that the higher education could hear more of? One of the things that we are now able to share is a toolkit which helps universities to set up communities of practice within their own sector, but we also have put together a wealth of resources, from articles to books to ideas around how you can set this up yourself in your own organizations. And then if you want to join our communities of practice group, we have a linked group. We have over 35 people present there, and we have bi-monthly practice workshops. So you're more than welcome to join us. And that is it. I'll stop here. Thank you.